Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. Lucy, this young man Jacob Brown isn't just good-looking. His career is already secured. By the end of the year, he'll leave the military and report straight to the Railway Bureau. A stable lifelong job. Are you sure you're going to pass on this? When I caught the matchmaker's excited expression, I realized something. I had been reborn. I was back at the point in time when the Brown family sent a matchmaker to my house. This time I made a decision opposite to the one I made in my previous life. I don't want to meet him. The matchmaker panicked. Lucy, don't be so hasty. Let me tell you about Jacob Brown. He's not only handsome, he's known for his excellent character. You wouldn't find anyone like him within 100 miles. Do you even know how many young women dream about him? Memories of my previous life flooded my mind. I closed my eyes briefly, then interrupted her. I know. The matchmaker froze for a moment, seemingly caught off guard. She must have noticed something unusual when I nodded. Her confusion deepened. In my past life, I had indeed met Jacob Brown before the matchmaker had come to arrange this marriage. It was during the first month of my internship at the clinic in 1990. One night while I was on duty, a family member of a patient stormed into the hallway with a kitchen knife, yelling angrily, "You heartless doctors! I'll make you pay with your lives!" His crazed actions wildly swinging the knife terrified everyone into staying back. I was scared too, but as the only doctor on duty, I couldn't hide or run. My whole body was trembling as I stepped forward, trying to negotiate with him. "Sir, please, let's talk calmly." "There's nothing to talk about," he screamed. "I'll take one of your lives for his." The moment he saw me, his emotions spiraled out of control like a raging bull. He charged at me with the knife raised. The corridor was filled with screams as people scattered, trying to get away. My legs felt like they were cemented in place, unable to move. I closed my eyes, instinctively bracing for the pain of the knife's blow, but it didn't come. When I opened my eyes, a man stood between me and the attacker. With immense strength, he had grabbed and immobilized the hand holding the knife. Amid the chaos, he even turned to glance at me briefly. "Are you okay, miss?" I was too stunned to speak and could only shake my head. Soon the attacker was subdued, but the man who had shielded me left without giving his name. I thought it would be almost impossible to find him, but before I could start asking around, a patient who had witnessed the incident recognized him immediately. "That young man is Jacob Brown from the old Brown family. He's a soldier just back home visiting his family." I committed Jacob Brown's name to memory, so when the matchmaker mentioned his name, I agreed without hesitation. But that simple nod of mine caused Jacob Brown to hate me for the rest of his life. "Lucy, since you've met him, you know I'm not lying. This is a great match." The matchmaker thought there was still hope and continued promoting Jacob Brown. However, while thinking of Jacob, another name surfaced in my mind. Seeing me stay silent, the matchmaker opened her mouth to speak again, but I interrupted her. "Wait, Lucy, the Brown family is indeed a good match," I said. "But the one I want to meet is Jacob Brown's older brother, Robert Brown." After escorting the matchmaker out of the yard, I was about to head back inside when I heard someone call my name. The familiar voice sent a chill down my spine. I turned around abruptly, and there he was, Jacob Brown, standing under the pomegranate tree outside the yard. The man I remembered as a gray-haired elder was now a young man in his prime. Standing beside him was a woman in a white dress, jasmine white, the woman he cherished for his entire life. Seeing me turn around, Jacob paused briefly before saying something to Jasmine. Their gazes lingered for a moment before they parted, and Jacob approached me. Standing before me, Jacob got straight to the point. "Lucy Carter, this time I won't marry you. You should give up on that idea." The coldness in Jacob Brown's gaze pierced me, identical to the way he had looked at me in my past life when he watched me fall to ruin. But I caught something in his words, a crack in his statement. He said, "This time." Combining that with my memories of the past, I realized something crucial. When the matchmaker had come to discuss our marriage, Jacob had still been in the military. My first formal meeting with him hadn't been until 3 months later during the Laba festival. In just a few seconds it became clear to me. Jacob Brown had also been reborn. His sudden appearance here could only mean one thing. He must have snuck away to stop Jasmine White from marrying someone else, and while he was at it, he was also here to prevent me from becoming his wife again. Pretending to be clueless, I gave him a blank look. Who are you? Jacob seemed startled for a moment. Then realization dawned on him. Of course, how could you possibly? He glanced at me again but stopped mid-sentence. Yet I could guess the rest of his unspoken words. How could you have been reborn too? What about me? I asked, feigning confusion. Nothing. Jacob cleared his throat as if trying to dismiss the thought. I'm Jacob Brown. My parents just sent the matchmaker to your house, didn't they? I noted it, then pretended to have an epiphany. Oh, so you're the Jacob Brown the matchmaker mentioned. I acted as though I were meeting my blind date for the first time, deliberately giving him a scrutinizing look from head to toe. Jacob seemed nervous, his brow furrowing as if afraid I might actually like him. Lucy Carter, he began, his tone wary. I came to see if. Before he could finish, I interrupted, pretending to be disappointed. Wow, so the matchmaker said you're supposed to be 8 feet tall and as handsome as Adonis. How come you look like this? Jacob froze mid-sentence, stunned by my dismissive tone. Hey, I added with mock disdain. It turns out the matchmaker was full of lies. What a joke. My critical tone left Jacob staring at me, utterly baffled. What do you mean by that? For all his confidence, Jacob had always been a bit vain. In our past life, he had been the most sought-after bachelor in the village, famous for his good looks. He'd never had to worry about finding a match. Back then, his parents had met me during a visit to the clinic. They had liked my gentle demeanor and polite manners, which led them to arrange the matchmaker visit. To unsettle Jacob further, I continued with a nonchalant shrug. You didn't know when the matchmaker praised you? I was actually intrigued and wanted to meet you. Hearing this, Jacob's tense expression eased slightly, and the corner of his mouth curled up in subtle relief. But just as quickly, his faint smile disappeared when I added, but now that I've met you in person, I've realized you're just average. Your looks are average, your build is average, even your personality, nothing special, honestly. You're not my type at all. I paused for effect, then delivered the final blow with a smirk. It's not just this life. I wouldn't marry you in the next life or the one after that. Jacob's pupils contracted slightly as he processed my words. Lucy Carter, you, Jacob Brown? I cut him off firmly. I believe this is our first meeting. Please address me as Miss Carter. His eyes locked onto my face, his voice laced with disbelief. You're serious about not wanting to marry me? Of course, I replied without hesitation, nodding for emphasis. Hearing my answer, Jacob pressed his lips together, momentarily lost for words. He should have felt relieved, but a shadow passed over his expression as though my response had caught him completely off guard. I could tell he had expected me to throw a tantrum, clinging to the idea of marrying him no matter what. Instead, I had said something entirely unexpected, that I wasn't interested in him at all. Good, that's good, he finally said, nodding slowly as if trying to convince himself. Jacob Brown gave me one last cold glance before turning and walking back toward Jasmine White. I couldn't hear what he said to her, but her shy smile immediately gave her emotions away. The two of them walked away side by side. I didn't sit idle either. As soon as I returned to the house, I grabbed some paper and a pen, quickly drafting a formal report about Jacob's unauthorized leave from his unit. The matchmaker was efficient. It wasn't long before she came back with news about Robert Brown. However, her phone call didn't bring good news. Lucy, she said hesitantly. Robert declined. He already has someone in his heart. She tried to persuade me to reconsider Jacob. Her words left me deep in thought. So, Robert already had someone he liked even this early on. In my previous life, I had only met Robert twice. He was 4 years older than Jacob, and the two were half-brothers, born of the same father but different mothers. After their father remarried, Robert moved south with his uncle. He attended college there and stayed to run a business, rarely returning. The first time I met Robert was at my wedding with Jacob. It was a brief encounter during the banquet. Later that night, Jacob had been heavily drunk and was carried back to our room in a near unconscious state. Once the guests had left, I changed out of my wedding dress and busied myself preparing hot water to help him wash up. Afterward, I stepped out into the courtyard for a moment to rest, leaning against the steps. I hadn't noticed anyone else was there until a deep voice emerged from the darkness. "I never thought the one he married would be you." Startled, I looked up. Beneath the locust tree stood a man, his sharp features illuminated by the faint moonlight. His face was cold and enigmatic. After a moment of hesitation, I recognized him. It was Robert Brown. He stared at me for a long moment before murmuring, almost to himself, "Why did it have to be you?" I didn't understand what he meant then. The strong smell of alcohol hit me, and I realized he must have been drinking heavily. I assumed he was just drunk and talking nonsense, so I turned to leave. But before I could, Robert followed me, frightened, and quickly called out, "Big brother!" My words seemed to snap him back to reality. His gaze swept over my face, lingering for a moment. Then he stepped back, putting a safe distance between us. With a faint, bitter smile, he said, "Sister-in-law, congratulations on your marriage. I wish you both a long and happy life together." After saying that, he turned and disappeared into the night. The second time I saw Robert was after I had been driven to death by Jacob and our son. When my soul left my body, it didn't immediately fade away. Instead, I hovered in the air, watching as Jacob and our son frantically tried to save me. They rushed me to the hospital, but when the doctor announced my death, neither of them shed a single tear. Instead, my son let out a sigh of relief. "Dad, finally. Now she can't interfere with your plan to be buried with Jasmine in the future." I had thought that death would bring an end to all pain, but hearing those words sent a cold shiver through my soul. Jacob sighed with apparent relief. "Yes, now I can finally be with Jasmine openly. I only hope that in our next life, I'll meet you again, Jasmine." Jacob handled my funeral with shocking indifference. He took me straight from the hospital to the crematorium, then casually buried my ashes in a remote cemetery. He didn't even bother with a proper service, merely sending a brief message about my death in the family group chat. And that was the sum of my life tied to Jacob Brown. Watching it all unfold, I felt only one word in my heart: regret. If I were given another chance, I would never marry Jacob Brown again. Just as my soul was about to dissipate, Robert Brown appeared at my grave. He bent down, his aging hands trembling as he gently touched the photo on my tombstone. His gaze was filled with such tenderness and sorrow as he softly repeated my name. "Lucy, Lucy, Lucy. I'm so sorry I was too late." In that moment I realized that, in this world, in a place I had never known, someone had deeply, painfully loved me. "Do you have Robert Brown's address?" I asked the matchmaker. The matchmaker had no idea why I wanted it, but still managed to find it for me quickly. Once I had the address, I spent the entire night thinking about what to write. As dawn broke, I decided to use a spare photo from my work ID and penned a single line on the letter paper. "Hello, Mr. Brown. I am your prospective match, Lucy Carter." After sending the letter, I went to the clinic to start my shift. To my surprise, the first patient I received was Jasmine White. Jacob wasn't with her, which likely meant he had quietly returned to his unit. "Dr. Carter, we meet again," Jasmine said with an overly familiar tone as she took a seat.
"Ik glänste her briefly."
We've met before. I wasn't close to Jasmine in my past life. We had met no more than 10 times. The first time was on the road when she returned home after her husband's death. I had no idea back then that she was the woman Jacob cherished in his heart, and I had even warmly pointed her in the right direction. "You don't remember?" Jasmine asked, her tone laced with mock surprise. Her reaction made me pause. Could she have been reborn too? But before I could delve into it, she continued, "I was standing right next to Jacob when he came to tell you he wouldn't marry you. So she hadn't been reborn." I pretended to remember. "Oh, I see. I didn't pay much attention at the time." Jasmine's lips twitched, clearly dissatisfied with my answer. "What brings you here? Are you unwell?" I asked. "Dr. Carter, I'm not here for treatment." Jasmine crossed her legs, exuding an air of unwarranted superiority. "I'm here to tell you that Jacob loves me, so stop clinging to him." I looked at her as though she were delusional, remaining silent. Mistaking my silence for acquiescence, Jasmine pressed on. "Do you think secretly maintaining contact with Jacob's parents behind his back will get you anywhere? This is the modern era of free love. Jacob has already promised me that once he returns from the army, We'll get married. At that, her meaning became crystal clear. All I had done was send the matchmaker to inquire about Robert Brown, but in Jasmine's eyes, it had somehow turned into me pestering Jacob. This misunderstanding, however, sparked an even better plan for pulling Jacob down with me. I smiled faintly and said, "You're right, I do like Jacob, and Jacob's parents have made it clear that no matter how much he loves you, they'll never let you into their home unless, of course, you show up pregnant." The moment the words left my mouth, I covered it with my hand in feigned shock. Jasmine's expression shifted, her pride visibly wounded. Before leaving, she sneered, "Lucy Carter, with your intelligence, it's a wonder you became a doctor." Watching her leave, I couldn't help but smirk. I hope she doesn't disappoint me and brings me some useful news. Moments later, another patient walked in. Glancing toward the door Jasmine had just exited. An elderly woman was here for a checkup. A venereal disease, perhaps. I raised my eyes and said flatly, "Doctors are obligated to maintain patient confidentiality regarding any condition." I looked at the elderly woman and replied firmly, "We don't discuss other people's private matters here." She sat down undeterred. "You don't have to say anything. I already know." I stared at her in confusion. "Why do you say that?" She leaned in, adopting the tone of someone sharing village gossip. "Dr. Carter, don't be fooled by her good looks and clean clothes. She works in a dance hall. How many decent people work in places like that? Men and women coming and going all the time. Who knows what they're doing inside? It's filthy. If I had a daughter like that, I'd beat her to death." I didn't know much about Jasmine White's background, but this gave me some insight. It seemed that Jacob's parents didn't approve of her and refused to let her into their family, likely because of her job and the reputation it carried. The days that followed were relatively quiet. I found myself counting on my fingers, estimating when Robert Brown might receive my letter. In this era, the fastest delivery for a letter was about a week, but it could take as long as 2 weeks or even a month. A month passed, but I still hadn't received a reply from Robert. Anxiety began to creep in. Had he not received it, or had I been mistaken from the start? Perhaps Robert's feelings weren't for me at all. As my mind spiraled with doubts, I made a bold decision. I requested leave from work and prepared to head south to find Robert and ask him directly. 3 days later, I arrived at the address the matchmaker had given me. The door was opened not by Robert, but by a strikingly fashionable young woman. She greeted me in a regional dialect I didn't understand, then switched to halting, accented Mandarin. "Who are you looking for?" I suddenly felt a wave of nervousness. I'm looking for Mr. Brown." A man's voice called from inside the house. "Who is it?" I froze, unable to speak. Reflexively, I glanced at the slip of paper with the address. It was correct. Then I looked back at the woman in front of me. My heart sank. "Sorry, I must have the wrong address," I mumbled before quickly turning away. I had just entered the stairwell when I heard their conversation behind me. "Who was that at the door?" the man asked. The pretty woman replied casually. She said she had the wrong place. "Forget about it," the man said. "It's rare for us to have the house to ourselves today." The door closed with a heavy thud, cutting off the rest of their conversation. I leaned against the concrete wall, taking deep breaths as a strange sense of guilt washed over me. Then, unable to help myself, I muttered bitterly, "Lucy Carter, you've really embarrassed yourself this time." But even as I closed my eyes, my mind couldn't help but replay the image of Robert standing at my grave, tears streaming down his face. The despair, the pain. It was so vivid. Still, it was clear now. Robert had someone else in his life. I didn't intrude that same day. I booked a train ticket home for the evening time. Time slipped by in the midst of this back and forth. Before I knew it, the end of the year had arrived, and Jacob Brown had completed his service and returned home. I saw him again outside a state-run restaurant. His parents, eager to celebrate his return, had organized a gathering of family and friends to welcome him back. Inside, the atmosphere was lively, filled with praise for Jacob's obedience, filial piety, and bright future at the Railway Bureau. There was even talk of finding him a good match. No one could have anticipated that Jacob would bring Jasmine White to the gathering on such a joyous day, humiliating his parents in front of everyone. The two of them arrived together at the entrance, and as they turned, they spotted me walking out of the restaurant. The smiles on their faces instantly vanished. Jacob was the first to react. "What are you doing here?" I met his gaze calmly. "Why shouldn't I be here?" I rolled my eyes at Jacob Brown. "Is this restaurant yours, Lucy Carter? Is that how you talk to me?" Jacob's brow furrowed deeply, clearly displeased. In my previous life, I had been married to him for 50 years and never once stood up to him. It led him to believe he could still treat me the same way now. I curved my lips into a slight smile. "Jacob Brown, do you really think you're that important? It's a pity you've got the arrogance but not the fate to match it." His face darkened further at my words, his fist hanging by his side clenched tightly. I could see the impulse to hit me flash in his eyes. I wasn't afraid. If he dared lay a hand on me, it would only hasten the consequences of my report to his unit. They wouldn't need to investigate further before kicking him out of his prestigious railway bureau position. Jasmine White, surprisingly the more rational one this time, pressed her hand against Jacob's and gave him a warning look, silently urging him to stay calm. She then stepped forward, puffing out her chest as if to defend her man. "Lucy Carter, I know why you're here. You heard Jacob was back and wanted to use his parents' presence to force another meeting with him, didn't you?" I almost laughed at her assumption. So much for giving her credit for intelligence. "Lucy Carter, I didn't expect you to be so shameless. I've already made it clear I'm never marrying you. Just give up." As Jasmine spoke, Jacob's expression shifted as if he'd suddenly understood something. He looked at me with a dawning realization, as though this ridiculous assumption now made perfect sense to him. Jasmine continued smugly, "But let me tell you, don't waste your efforts. It won't work." She touched her stomach in a subtle motion, but it was enough. I immediately understood what she was implying. She was pregnant. Jacob, however, didn't seem to know. "Jasmine, let's not waste words on her," Jacob said, clearly eager to get away from me. He didn't even want to spend another second in my presence. Placing his hand on Jasmine's back, he guided her away. Inside, Jasmine flashed Jacob a sweet smile. "Okay, Jacob, I'll listen to you." I watched them walk away, their faces full of smiles and smirks. All you want now, it won't be long before those smiles turn into tears. The very next morning, news about Jacob and Jasmine had already spread. Even the cleaning lady took a moment to gossip while sweeping. "Did you hear old Brown's son came back from the army and immediately got tangled up in a scandal? Knock some girl up already." "I heard." "Lucy, did you hear about this?" I was just passing by when the cleaning lady called out to me, pretending to know nothing. I asked her, "What? You don't know?" "Let me tell you." The cleaning lady's eagerness to share was almost tangible. "Last night after you left, Jacob brought Jasmine home to meet his parents. Before Jacob could even say a word, his father saw Jasmine and immediately shouted, 'Get out!' She clapped her hands for emphasis. Scared Jasmine burst into tears right there. Jacob, of course, couldn't stand to see her cry. He shielded her behind him, and the argument quickly escalated. "His parents even mentioned your name." "Really? What did they say?" I asked casually. "They told him, 'Son, you're letting this fox enchant you. Any woman off the street would be better than her. Look at Dr. Carter from the clinic. Her looks, her education.'" At this point, the cleaning lady lowered her voice, mimicking Jacob. "And you know what he said? 'Dad, I will never marry anyone but Jasmine. If you try to force me to marry Lucy Carter, I'd rather die in a car accident today.'" Hearing this, his father was so furious he nearly fainted on the spot. No matter how private the room was, such a commotion couldn't stay hidden for long. Soon, people in the restaurant began gathering outside their door, drawn by the shouting. When they looked in, they saw Jasmine kneeling tearfully in front of Jacob's parents, crying so pitifully it tugged at their hearts. Through her sobs, she pleaded, "Uncle, Auntie, I know you don't like me." Jasmine White pleaded, her voice soft and tearful. "But Jacob and I truly love each other. Please, I beg you, let us be together." Jacob's mother pointed at Jasmine, her voice sharp with anger. "Fox spirit, you're nothing but a homewrecker." Jasmine lowered her head, silently enduring the barrage of insults. When Jacob's mother finally ran out of steam, Jasmine lifted her head slightly and said, "I'm pregnant with Jacob's child." Her words hung in the air, silencing the entire room. Jacob's parents were stunned, and even Jacob himself looked completely taken aback. At this point, there was no room left for his parents to oppose the relationship. Begrudgingly, they helped Jasmine to her feet and closed the door to discuss the marriage arrangements in private. But it was a busy restaurant, and gossip spread like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone was talking about it. She finished her tale with a satisfied grin. Before she could continue, a nurse interrupted us. "Dr. Carter, someone's here to see you." "Who is it?" I asked casually. "I don't know." The nurse replied, "But he's tall, handsome, and very distinguished looking." Curious, I stepped outside. The moment I saw him, I froze. It was Robert Brown. This was the third time I had seen him across 2 lifetimes. His features were even more striking than I remembered. His face was sharp and refined. He wore a brown trench coat that perfectly complemented his commanding presence. His arrival turned heads as passers-by couldn't help but steal glances at him. Within moments, Robert approached me. He wasted no time, speaking urgently. "I received your letter." Memories of my failed visit to the South flashed through my mind. Quickly composing myself, I lied without hesitation. "I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, but I didn't send any letter." Robert's eyes widened slightly. "It wasn't you?" "No," I said to my story. "It must have been my younger cousin playing a prank." Internally, I winced at my excuse. "Sorry, little cousin, you're taking the blame for this one." Robert's gaze didn't waver. His sharp eyes locked onto mine. "But they said you came looking for me a month ago. Is that true?" My lie unraveled before me, leaving me no choice but to confess. "Fine, Mr. Brown, yes, I sent the letter, and yes, I came looking for you, but at the time I didn't know you were married." "Lucy," Robert interrupted firmly, "I'm not married. I don't even have a girlfriend." I stared at him, stunned, but he seemed to anticipate what I was about to say and began explaining. "For years, I've avoided contacting my family, but I couldn't cut ties entirely. The address I gave them was for my business partner. The people living there aren't related to me, and I didn't receive your letter right away." His explanation caught me off guard. "How can I be sure you're telling the truth?" I asked, hesitant. He looked genuinely pained by my distrust. "You don't believe me, Lucy?" After everything I had endured in my previous life, I was no longer the naive girl I once was. My silence stretched on for several seconds. Robert seemed to take my hesitation as his answer. With a quiet sigh, he said, "All right, I understand then." Without another word, he turned and walked away. I watched his retreating figure, a strange mixture of emotions swirling inside me. My heart skipped a beat. He was leaving just like that. Halfway through his departure, as if suddenly remembering something, Robert Brown turned back and said to me, "Lucy Carter, wait for me. Promise me you'll wait." Then he disappeared into the crowd. I stood there briefly, lost in thought, before refocusing on my work. The next time I saw Robert was 2 days later in the afternoon. I had just finished my shift when he arrived. This time, though, he wasn't alone. He was dragging another man by the collar as he hurried toward me. "Explain," Robert demanded, shoving the man forward. The man brushed at his collar in annoyance. "Let go of me. You're going to ruin my shirt." Just then, a head peeked out from behind the man. When they saw me, they exclaimed in broken Mandarin, "Oh, pretty lady, we meet again." I blinked in surprise. "You? You too?" Robert released the man, gestured toward him. "This is Sunno, my business partner and friend." Sunno straightened his collar and greeted me with a smile. "Dr. Carter, hello." At Robert's pointed look, so quickly wrapped his arm around a woman standing beside him. "This is my wife, Manja." To ensure I believed him, he even pulled out their marriage certificate, holding it up for me to see. The whole display left me torn between amusement and exasperation. It was only then that I fully understood Robert's earlier words. "Wait for me." He had gone to great lengths to bring Sunno and Jay here, flying them into the province and then taking an overnight bus, all just to prove the truth to me. In that moment, it felt as though my heart had been struck by a sugar-coated missile. Sweet and overwhelming. As we sat together, Sunno filled me in on the details I hadn't known. It turned out that my letter had arrived just a week after I sent it. However, it had been buried in a pile of other correspondence and ignored at the time Robert was away in Nanyang. It wasn't until he returned and sorted through the letters that he found mine. When Manja saw the photo I'd included, she suddenly remembered meeting me before. Once Robert learned I had come looking for him, he couldn't wait any longer and rushed to find me. So that was the truth of it all. When I looked back at Robert, he was watching me, his eyes brimming with love. "Do you believe me now?" he asked softly. I nodded. "I do. Whether in my past life or this one, I truly believed him. Robert Brown genuinely loved me." Ignoring the curious stares of passers-by, I stepped forward and embraced him. "Robert, let's get married." The day we went to register our marriage, we were just leaving the Civil Affairs office when we ran into Jacob Brown and Jasmine White. Jacob's eyes immediately locked onto me. "Lucy Carter. Big brother." He froze when he noticed Robert standing beside me. His gaze dropped to our intertwined hands, and his face filled with shock. "You two? How are you together?" Robert, acting as if he were guarding a treasure, quickly pulled me behind him as though afraid Jacob might take another look at me. Compared to Jacob, Robert remained composed and unbothered. He chuckled coldly. "Why are you so surprised?" "Lucy Carter, come here," Jacob barked, his voice filled with frustration. "Explain yourself. Why are you with my brother?" In our past life, Jacob had always been jealous, and that jealousy carried into this life. Now he was directing all his anger at me. I wanted to step forward and confront Jacob, but Robert firmly held me in place, refusing to let me go. From behind Robert Brown, I shot back at Jacob Brown, "It's none of your business." Perhaps Jacob was so overwhelmed by the scene in front of him that he lost his composure. "Lucy Carter, do you even know that you're my wife?" The moment those words left his mouth, Robert's fist connected with Jacob's face, sending him stumbling back a few steps. Robert towered over him, glaring down. "Watch your mouth," he said coldly. "She's my wife." Cobb licked the blood off the corner of his mouth, seemingly ready to argue back, but Jasmine White quickly grabbed his arm. "Jacob, stop." Her voice brought him back to his senses. Perhaps he remembered that I had once been his wife, but only in a past life. However, that stubborn, suffocating possessiveness of his refused to let him back down easily. "You know what, Lucy?" Jacob sneered, trying to provoke me. "I get it now. You couldn't marry me, so you turned to my brother just to spite me, didn't you?" Even now, Jacob still thought I couldn't live without him. This time, I stepped out from behind Robert, meeting Jacob's self-assured and angry gaze. Calmly, I said, "Jacob Brown, do you know what you look like right now?" Confusion flickered across his face. Pointing to a pile of dog waste by the road, I said, "That." Jacob's face twisted with fury. "You're comparing me to a dog?" "No," I corrected him, my tone icy. "You're worse than a dog." Robert seized the moment to step in. "Darling, there's no need to waste words on people who don't matter. It's beneath you." "You're right, honey," I said, flashing Robert a sweet smile. "Let's go." We turned and walked away, leaving Jacob behind. His teeth were clenched so tightly in anger that I thought they might shatter. "Fine," Jacob roared after us. "Very well, Lucy Carter. If you knew what happened in your past life, you'd regret the choices you've made today." But before he could see me regret anything, Jacob found himself regretting instead. Moments later, several uniformed officers approached him. After presenting their documentation, they informed Jacob he needed to return with them for an investigation. Robert, seemingly eager to tell the world that I was his wife, had somehow procured a bag of candies. Everywhere we went, he handed them out, greeting people warmly. As a result, I heard every well-wish imaginable that day. Some people recognized Robert. "Hey, aren't you Old Brown's eldest son? You're back." Though Robert didn't like being referred to as Old Brown's son, he simply smiled and replied, "Yes, it's me." Someone else chimed in. "So the Browns sent a matchmaker to Dr. Carter's house, not for their youngest son, but for their eldest. Who would have thought Old Brown's eldest son would be so handsome? He and Dr. Carter look amazing together." By the time we returned home, the sky was nearly dark. Ever thoughtful, Robert heated water to soak my feet. When he held my foot to remove my shoes, I instinctively pulled back, feeling awkward. He looked up at me. "What's wrong?" Embarrassed, I laughed nervously. "They smell." Of course, my feet didn't actually smell, but this was the first time anyone had done something like this for me, and I felt uneasy. Robert said nothing, simply removing my socks. Then, to my shock, he leaned down and kissed the top of my foot before looking up at me with a soft smile. "Smells sweet," he said. I was utterly stunned. "Haha, my dear wife." Robert Brown chuckled, nudging me gently. "In my eyes, everything about you is perfect." I closed my gaping mouth in disbelief. Is this what they mean by love? He makes the lover's eyes see beauty everywhere. As that thought crossed my mind, a memory from my past life suddenly surfaced, eerily similar to this moment. I was about 8 months pregnant, my belly so large that bending over was nearly impossible. I had asked Jacob Brown to help me trim my toenails, afraid he might find it disgusting. I had even scrubbed my feet with soap and rinsed them carefully beforehand, but Jacob had looked at me with cold disdain. "You want me to cut your toenails? That's disgusting." Love, or the lack of it, was such an obvious thing. Only now, in this life, did I fully realize that truth. "What are you thinking about?" Robert asked, noticing my distraction. I snapped out of my thoughts and met his gaze. "Oh, nothing," I began. "As a doctor, I should tell you that feet can harbor fungus. It's not a good idea to kiss them." Robert clearly hadn't expected such a blunt and unromantic response, but he nodded earnestly. "All right, I'll listen to you." Still, thoughts of Jacob lingered in my mind. I felt there were things I needed to clarify with Robert. "Robert," I said, patting the empty seat beside me, "sit here. I want to talk to you about something." "What is it?" he asked, his deep eyes fixed on mine. "It's about Jacob Brown," I started, but Robert interrupted me. "Lucy, I have something to tell you first." "All right," I said. "I had a dream," Robert began. "In it, I saw you married to Jacob Brown." My heart skipped a beat. Could Robert have been reborn too? But as he continued, I realized it was just a dream, a vivid reflection of my past life. Robert's eyes softened as he looked at me. "Lucy, I've never been afraid of anything in my life, but when I woke up from that dream, I was terrified. I was scared you had really married Jacob, scared that I'd lose you to him forever. That's why the first thing I did was go to Nanyang. I ended all my business there as quickly as I could. I wanted to find you before it was too late." His words brought tears to my eyes. I couldn't hold them back. "Thank you, Robert. Thank you for loving me even in this life." Robert gently wiped away my tears. "You silly woman, what's there to thank me for? It's you and me. No need for thanks." Despite the warmth of the moment, a question lingered in my mind. Robert and I had never met before this life. How had he come to love me so deeply? After some persistent questioning, Robert finally confessed. It turned out he had seen me once before many years ago. I had been just 15 or 16 at the time, wearing 2 simple braids and following an adult around. I couldn't recall the scene he described, but it had stayed with him vividly. "When I first saw you," Robert admitted, "it was your beauty that caught my eye. But after that, I couldn't forget you." His honesty made my heart ache in the best way possible. "I've spent all these years trying to find you," Robert Brown said, his voice soft yet firm. "Finding you feels like my destiny, and now that I have, I won't let you go." I couldn't imagine how just a fleeting glance in a crowd had been enough for Robert to develop such deep feelings. Sighed on me, but in my past life, he truly had been alone without anyone by his side. Being loved by him felt incredible. Our eyes met, and the emotions between us deepened. Robert leaned closer, clearly intending to kiss me. I suddenly covered his mouth. He looked at me with a hint of grievance. "Why?" I hadn't forgotten that he had just kissed my foot. "Go brush your teeth 10 times, not a single one less." "All right," Robert agreed obediently and went off to brush his teeth. The next time I heard news of Jacob Brown was half a month later. By then, I had resigned from my job at the clinic and was preparing to move to a southern city with Robert. While I was packing up my office, Jasmine White suddenly barged in. Seeing me, she rushed forward and grabbed my hand. "Dr. Carter, help me." I looked at her confused. "Dr. Carter, can you perform an abortion for me?" Jasmine asked, her eyes filled with desperation. Staring at her, I couldn't help but glance down at her noticeably swollen belly. "You want an abortion? You're almost 5 months along." "Yes, I just reached 5 months," she replied anxiously. Suppressing my shock, I said firmly, "I can't do that. At this stage, it's no longer an abortion. It's an induced labor." I won't perform such a procedure. Hearing my refusal, Jasmine looked like she was about to cry. Dr. Carter, I know I've said many awful things to you before. I was out of my mind. Please don't hold it against me. I'm begging you, please help me. I'll even get on my knees if that's what it takes. As she spoke, she started kneeling down. To be honest, I didn't like Jasmine White in my past life. Part of the reason I died in anger was because of her. But when I thought about it, I didn't hold a grudge against her strong enough to let her grovel like this. I reached out trying to pull her up. If you have something to say it standing up. Don't kneel like this. I won't get up unless you agree to help me, Jasmine said resolutely, willing to risk everything. Then don't get up, I replied bluntly, refusing to engage in her theatrics. I let go of her and continued gathering my belongings to leave. Panicked, Jasmine quickly stood up and chased after me. Jacob Brown is in trouble. I stopped and turned to look at her. Jacob's downfall was something I had foreseen, but I still wanted to hear it from her directly. After Jacob left his unit without authorization, someone reported him, Jasmine explained hastily. Following an investigation, the charges were confirmed. Now he's facing a 3-year prison sentence, and his job at the Railway Bureau is gone. She looked at me with pleading eyes. I can't let this child grow up with a father in prison, and I can't let this child ruin my life either. Dr. Carter, as one woman to another, please help me. Her eyes, filled with desperation, seemed to see me as her last lifeline. Seeing how eager Jasmine was to sever ties with Jacob and get rid of his child, I couldn't help but say, Jasmine, don't you know how much Jacob loves you? He loves you so much that he'd sacrifice his life for you. He loves you enough to die for you. He even dreamed of being buried alongside you, hoping to be your husband again in the next life. I said flatly. Jasmine White sneered, who cares about his love? Love doesn't fill your stomach or pay the bills. I hadn't expected Jasmine to be so clear-headed at such a critical moment. I couldn't help but feel a bit of admiration for her. As we spoke, Jacob Brown's parents stormed into the hospital, followed by a swarm of relatives. His aunts, uncles, cousins, and more. The moment they spotted Jack, they surrounded her on all sides, their voices overlapping in a barrage of accusations. Jacob's mother pointed a finger at her, furious. Jasmine White, don't you dare think about getting rid of my grandson. Dr. Carter, help me. Jasmine clung to my arm, desperate. In the end, she was dragged away by the Browns. If nothing unexpected happened, Jasmine would be forced to give birth to the child. I remembered that in my previous life, Jasmine had a congenital heart condition and died in her early 40s. I couldn't help but wonder if she would survive childbirth in this life. In that moment, I found myself hoping for her safety, for both her and the child's, and secretly I hoped that child might be my son from the past life. After all, in their previous lives, Jacob and our son had dreamed of a perfect happy family of 3 with Jasmine. Still, I doubted Jacob's future would be peaceful. He was no longer the man he had been in our past life, a man of status and wealth, but people always have to pay a price for what they seek. As the setting sun bathed the world in golden light, Robert Brown reached for my hand. Lucy, he said softly, from now until the end of our days, I'll rely on you. I smiled, my heart full of warmth. Robert, may the rest of our lives be filled with happiness and harmony.